I was in a state of shock and turmoil. It was unfixable. I sat in front of my computer that morning, and all I could think was, God, why? I had just discovered that somehow hours and hours of writing had mysteriously disappeared from my website, years of daily devotionals. I had readers waiting to read my daily content, and there was no time to focus on this loss. I had ministry to do. I had to move forward. I took a deep breath. I pulled out my Bible, and at that moment, God directed me to what my first entry would be about: the story of Esther. I guess God knew that Esther's story needed to be my story that morning. I'm the type of person that struggles to stay in control of my life, and now I had lost control. Could I learn to let go and give God complete control? Esther isn't the hero of her story, and I am not the hero of my stories. Our powerful God is the hero. God is orchestrating our lives for His purpose. God is in control of my life, the good and the bad times. I can rest in Him. I was in third grade when I realized I had a real problem. I knew I had a speech impediment because kids on the bus had pointed it out, but it hadn't really bothered me much until the day speech therapy began from third through fifth grade. I had trouble with the letters S and Z. For some reason, I said them out of the side of my mouth. So once a week in my public school, I left my class and my friends, and I headed to the speech therapy room where I wore headphones and I repeated over and over the S and Z sound correctly. My speech therapist was kind, and we played fun games, and I said, "Sally sold seashells down by the seashore," over and over. I practiced at home, I practiced at therapy, and a few long years later, voila, no more impediment. But then a new issue arose. I started losing my voice on a regular basis. Losing my voice has been a regular occurrence in my life since about fifth grade. Sometimes when I get a cold, it goes straight to my throat and voice. And so I lose my voice. And when I say lose it, I mean gone. Not a squeak comes out. I am silent for about 5 days, and tea and honey are my best friend. I find it ironic that the very thing I love to do, talk, for God's glory, is the very area physically I am weak. I couldn't talk straight as a kid, and when I finally could, I started losing it. I remember a time back in 2009 when I was going to be on a nationally televised show and I was going to be interviewed in New York City. I lost my voice the week of the taping. So I went to God in prayer, begging Him to give it back to me, and I sensed that He was teaching me that when He gives it back, He wanted me to use my voice for His glory only, not mine. God has kept me dependent on Him to have a voice. Have you felt afraid to serve God in an area because of your own weaknesses? God doesn't look at birth order and background. Often He uses the weak and the overlooked of this world to lead. In the Old Testament culture, where the younger served the older, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, and David were all the youngest in their families. It's called grace. By the grace of God, He uses anyone, no matter what their weaknesses, for His glory. If He did not use people with weaknesses, then He'd have no one to use. And so that brings us to the woman we are going to study today, Esther. Her background is she's a poor Jewish orphan girl, a girl who was powerless, who God called to go up against two of the most powerful men in the world at that time, King Xerxes and his right-hand man, Haman. But Esther had a powerful God who was about to use her courage and her voice to save His people. Let's look at the power of King Xerxes. In chapter 1 of Esther, the Bible tells us about an extravagant feast happening in the king's palace. We are told his palace had white cotton curtains and cords of fine linen and purple hung from silver rods and marble pillars, just like my house. It says the couches were made of gold and silver. All right, I'm not so sure that sounds comfortable, right? But stick with me here. The couches also had marble and pearls and precious stones. This setting is elaborate. Drinks were served in golden goblets and royal wine was served lavishly. It says that there were no rules to how much they could drink. Each was to drink as he desired, so the waitstaff was to continue to pour the drinks nonstop. Now at the same time, the king's queen, Queen Vashti, was also giving a feast for her women in the palace. And so this all-powerful King Xerxes summons his queen to come so he can show her off, and she refuses to come. And so she is removed as queen. Oh, this King Xerxes, he thinks he's so powerful and in control, but God is orchestrating everything. So in Esther chapter 2, officers are sent throughout the kingdom to look for beautiful young women to be brought into the king's harem. In Esther, a Jewish orphan girl is brought in. Now her uncle Mordecai advises her not to tell that she is a Jew. And verse 7 says that she had a beautiful figure and she was lovely to look at. She was hot. And so verse 17 says that the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight. And so he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen. God is orchestrating this. God is in control. Xerxes thinks he is, but he is not. And the plot thickens. Haman is promoted to second in command only to King Xerxes, and he expects everyone to bow down to him as he walks by. He is a prideful man. But Mordecai, Esther's uncle, refuses to bow down, and this infuriates Haman. And so he decides that he wants to destroy all of Mordecai's people in the land. That's all of the Jews, including Esther. So he goes to King Xerxes, and he asks for this. And the king says yes. So in chapter 3, it says that letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instructions to destroy, kill, and annihilate all of the Jews. They are about to be wiped out. And verse 15 says, the king and Haman sat down to drink. They're fine. But the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Everything seems out of control. But God is in control. Can you imagine the fear that God's people must have felt with this hanging over their heads? And so Mordecai makes Esther aware of what is happening, and Esther responds. And does she respond immediately with courage? No, she responds with fear. Esther had not been with her groom, the king, in 30 days, and going to him without being summoned could mean death. And then Mordecai is honest with her in chapter 4, and I love this. We need Mordecais in our lives to speak truth to us. He says, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise up for the Jews from another place. Mordecai was saying, if you are not willing to be used by God, then God is going to use someone else. What great faith Mordecai had. And then he says, perhaps you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. He is telling her God is in control. This is why you are the queen, for this very moment, for such a time as this. God is in control. And so we see the faith of Esther now growing and the courage, and she's going to do 5 things. First, she prays. She asks the Jews to pray and fast for 3 days, and she prays and fasts too. Next, she's willing to perish. She knew this was a serious decision. She has considered the cost, and she decides it's okay if she dies. She says, when we have finished praying, I will go to the king, and if I perish, I perish. Then she prepares. Not being called before the king in 30 days could have been a major problem. Who was the king seeing? Was he maybe going to replace her? So she prepares by putting on her royal robes, and I am sure that she looks stunning. She has a plan. When the king points his scepter toward her, he says, what is your request? You may have up to half the kingdom. I'm thinking a shopping spree might be fun right about now, right? But she's not selfish. She knows her purpose and what she came for, and she has a plan. So she invites the king and Haman to a feast she has prepared that evening. So she prays. She is willing to perish. She prepares, and she has a plan, and now she is patient. They come to dinner again, and the king asks what she wants and offers up to half the kingdom, but something in her spirit inside is prompting her to wait, that the time is just not right to ask. So instead, she asks them to come back to dinner again the next day. She is patient, And this is interesting because I think I might have just blurted it out. I mean, the king seems very willing to give her what she wants, and all these people are waiting on her to save them. They are praying and fasting. The pressure had to be huge. But she is patient, waiting on God's timing. And she was right to wait, because what happens next shows that God is orchestrating all of these events in his timing. He is in control. That night, Haman goes home and his head is huge. He could probably hardly fit through that front door as he entered. He just had dinner with the king and the queen, and he is feeling powerful, and he brags about all his promotions in the dinner. And then he says how angry, though, he still is because Mordecai will not bow down to him. And in this proud moment, Haman is led astray by his wife, his friends, his pride, and his anger. Let's not miss the fact that he was led astray by his family and friends. May we be careful to only listen to family members like Mordecai, who are full of faith, and not those who are like Haman's family. And so he's led astray, and he builds gallows to hang Mordecai on. But God, he is in control. God is orchestrating all of this. And so that same night, the king cannot sleep, and the records are opened and read out loud to him, and the king discovers that long ago, Mordecai saved his life. King Xerxes is reminded of Mordecai's loyalty to him before Esther's request. God is in control. Her timing and willingness to be patient and wait mattered. Is there something in your life that you need to be patient for? Give God space and time to work. We don't always have to blurt out the first thing on our minds. And so the second dinner takes place with Esther, King Xerxes, and Haman, and now the timing is right. God is in control. And there she reveals her request for her people to be saved, and in a twist of events, Haman is hung on his own gallows, Mordecai is honored, and all of her people are saved. Esther prayed. She was willing to perish. She prepared, she planned, and she was patient, and the power of God was revealed. Xerxes was powerful. Haman was powerful, but Esther's God is more powerful than any man, and your God is more powerful than any man. God was in control in Esther's life, and God is in control in your life. Sometimes our lives turn upside down for a season. Maybe an exciting pregnancy turns into a miscarriage, or a routine checkup turns into a discovery of cancer, or a typical car ride turns into a wreck, or worse, a family member dies unexpectedly. And we wonder, is God really in control of everything? When storms hit and trials come into our lives, raw emotions bubble up under the surface and they begin to overflow, and we begin to ask God questions, and we wonder, does he care? Does God love me? Is he in control of my life? Yes, 1,000 times yes. Every page of Scripture points to a sovereign God. From the creation account in Genesis to the return of Christ in Revelation, our God is in complete control. But trusting God and acknowledging his sovereignty when life hurts is terribly difficult. I mean, Esther had lost her parents. Certainly that was a painful part of her story that was hard for Esther to understand as a child. Esther was part of a harem. She didn't have a regular marriage. She didn't get to live every day with her husband. He wasn't her friend. She had to be summoned and then live in fear and insecurity of whether his love for her would die or remain. That lack of security from a loss of parents and a husband who could fall out of love with her had to be hard. Her life must have felt so out of her control. Even her beauty she did not control. She was born that way. But God was with her. Her security was in God. There is no one like our God. God did not just create the heavens and the earth, but he is continually sustaining the heavens and the earth. He is in control. Whatever you are facing today, you can rest in God's love and care for you. Whatever trial you are in right now is meant to point you to God. Your suffering is meant to point you to God. Your losses are meant to point you to God. Why? Because God knows he is your greatest need. And when you have him, you can have faith and courage in the midst of your storm. live in Ohio, and most winters we have at least one big snowstorm, and it is so beautiful. The covering of snow on the houses and streets for a moment causes everything to be still and peaceful. The snow causes schools to be closed, and sleds come out, and hot cocoa and marshmallows fill our mugs. But not all storms are peaceful like a snowstorm. Sometimes the lightning strikes, and the thunder trembles, and the wind blows hard, and trees snap, and windows break, and homes and cars and businesses are destroyed. We do not always understand the cause of storms, but they come into everyone's lives. No one is immune from them, and when they hit, they are unexpected, they are scary, and they point us to a God greater than us. Our God is with us in the midst of our storms. Our trials remind us this world is not our home. We are just passing through. Our life is but a vapor. It's short because of our faith in the blood of Jesus Christ shed on the cross as a payment for our sins. Eternity in heaven is forever. In the end, God triumphs over evil. Esther was a woman of courage. She risked her life to save the lives of her people. But her courage goes further than just going to the king and asking for him to save her and her people. Esther did this in the presence of the guilty man who orchestrated all of this. She outed Haman to his face. That takes strength. I hate confrontation. I think I would have planned those dinners without Haman there. It would have been much easier for Esther to ask to be alone with the king and use some manipulative womanly ways, right, to woo him. But Esther, she did not mince words. She spoke openly and boldly right in the presence of Haman. She trusted God, and God was in control. He was in control of the king's insomnia. He was in control of the reading of the Chronicles and the fact that the reading actually covered the story of Mordecai's loyalty that night. And Esther's prayer, willingness to perish, preparations and plans, and her patience resulted in more than she even expected. Not only were her people saved, but Haman was executed, and Mordecai received a position of honor. God did in Ephesians 3:20 in her life. Ephesians 3:20 says, God is able to do abundantly more than all that we ask or even imagine, according to the power at work within us. It's God's power that goes beyond what we can even pray or prepare for. It went beyond for Esther. When life's trials come my way, I often pray for an Ephesians 3:20. Not my will, but thy will, Lord. And I pray this because I know that God can do more than I ask for. We can trust him. Your life might feel like Esther's. Maybe it didn't start out well. Esther's loss of her parents prepared her for the role God had for her in her life. I'm sure as a child she felt alone. And I'm sure as a queen, without her king spending time with her, she felt alone. If you felt alone in life, don't waste that pain. It might be the very thing God wants to use in your life for his glory. God used a glaring need to push Esther out of her comfort zone to be used by God. She could not ignore what was happening to her people. It's easy to see a need and say, somebody should do something about that, right? Than to step up and say, here I am, Lord, send me. And so I wonder, are you one of those who doubts your abilities? This is your call to courage. You are unique. God created you with a special skill set and your background that only you have for his very purposes. Like my speech impediment and voice trouble, even your weaknesses were fashioned according to his plan for you, not so you'd shrink back and quit, but so you trust him as you step up courageously for his glory. Your very weakness is what will reveal, without a doubt, it is God in control. That there's an Ephesians 3:20 happening in your life. That it is God working through you. We reap what we sow. If we sow seeds of fear, we reap nothing. If we sow seeds of doubt, we reap nothing. If we don't pray, we reap nothing. If we don't prepare, we reap nothing. If we don't plan, we reap nothing. If we aren't patient, we reap nothing. But if we sow seeds of courage and faith in our powerful God, we will reap a powerful harvest. God is in control. This is your call to courage and faith today. Is there something God is laying on your heart to step out and do for his glory for such a time as this? Don't hesitate. Do it. Your powerful God is with you. The enemy would love for us all to hang our heads and hide, but God is with us. And if God is for us, who can be against us? Like Esther, may we say, if I perish, I perish. God is in control. Even the wind and the waves obey him. May God find us obedient to his call on our lives today. Trust in your powerful God.